How is it that the least empathic people in the world have managed to trick other people into believing that they are empathic and that they themselves, the narcissists, actually believe that they are empathic? How the hell did that happen? So let's talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing. You've heard this one before. I'm sure many of you have. And if you didn't know, it's sort of fun to research the origins of this. The origin of this one, a wolf in sheep's clothing, is from one of Aesop's fables about the wolf who covered himself in the sheep's coat to mix in with a flock of sheep, and then who killed the shepherd who did not see the disguised wolf and then was, I guess, able to proceed to kill the rest of the sheep. Interestingly, that Aesop reference again appears in the New Testament, which may be the reference some of you are familiar with, and it's a twist on a line spoken by Jesus in the New Testament about false prophets. Aesop's writings are pre-biblical, so the reference was already out there and likely was already kind of part of, I don't know, whatever the conversational wisdom that was floating in the world. So this means that for about 2,500 years, people have had parables that they've known warning them of those who have malevolent motives disguising themselves to do harm. For 2,500 years, we have known that some people disguise themselves to get close and hurt us. So, I'm sure some of you are already like, well, yeah, this is related to narcissism. The relationship of this proverb, a wolf in sheep's clothing, to the understanding of narcissism is obviously as clear as day. Many people often ask, hey, listen, if these patterns are this toxic, if they are entitled and rageful and manipulative and invalidating, why don't people see this stuff early and get away? Well, because of the whole sheep's clothing thing, right? Narcissists, because of their focus on the superficial and the need for validation, have a really, really great front game. They are charming. They are charismatic. They are confident. They are curious. And they are often very, very well put together. Interestingly, research has shown that narcissists actually dress better and look better than non-narcissists because they put so much more time into their appearance. They actually, it's not just time, they put money, they put attention, and they put value into their appearance, and they judge other people on that basis as well. Anybody watching this who has ever gotten into a romantic or an intimate relationship with a narcissist will often report that the attraction that they had was magnetic, seductive, and hard to resist. Interestingly, even the covert narcissists have some good sheep's clothing. Theirs may not be designer sheep's clothing, but they do. What the covert narcissists will do is they'll often double down on this pseudo-empathy. They will envelop their target with lots of very focused, intense conversation. The covert narcissist will often show a pseudo-vulnerability and almost a sense that they need to be rescued. And that can actually even be more seductive than charm and charisma for many people. That idea that, oh, I could rescue or save or help this person is even more seductive. As a result of this, many people who have experienced narcissistic abuse actually get mad at themselves, feeling that they should have been smart enough, that they shouldn't have been tricked or snowed, that they were so foolish that that's the reason they got tricked. Remember that being drawn in by narcissists happens to the best of us. Listen, even nature is in on this. What is nature? Nature's all about the prettiest, biggest, flashiest flower getting the birds and bees, or the bird with the best plumage getting the mate, or the lion with the biggest mane getting to mate with the most robust lioness, right? We see this happen. But I don't know, frankly, if those pretty flowers or well-feathered birds or perfectly maned lions do end up gaslighting, invalidating, or blaming their mates. I think in nature it's a bit of a get in, get out kind of thing. Frankly, though, male lions do seem very selfish. It's another story for another day. So what do we take from these wolves in sheep's clothing? Counterintuitive as it is, charisma, the sort of sheep's clothing of the narcissist, should be a red flag. In fact, one interesting research study sort of pointed to the relationship of charisma to sort of success as a leader as an upside down U, like the letter U upside down when it comes to this idea of leadership, meaning that very low charisma wasn't good for leadership. Very high charisma wasn't good for leadership, but sort of a perfect mid-level of charisma was what worked best. But when you see the perfect exterior, that person who's almost a little bit too good to be true, the proverbial sheep's clothing, pay deep attention. Try and look at what is behind that furry, or I guess charming exterior. Ask pointed questions. Watch how they treat other people. Critically pay attention on how you feel when you're in their presence. Be mindful and take a step back. Too many people want the fairy tale to be true. Too many people want the charming, charismatic wolf to be a gentle lamb. The toxic patterns of any narcissistic relationship pattern show themselves early. Ask anyone who has been in a narcissistic relationship. The red flags were there pretty much from the jump. Our enabling culture means you gave second chances, and trauma bonding means you made endless justifications. And the wolf in sheep's clothing metaphor or proverb is also quite useful if you are dealing with a narcissistic family member or boss or friend. You may have very clearly experienced the contentious, invalidating, and cruel behavior they can pull off when nobody is looking. So it turns out that they're a wolf with you and a sheep with everyone else, which can feel isolating, confusing, and frustrating. And so the next time a sheep approaches you, don't relax, take a minute, and try and look behind the wool. And yeah, if you keep having to always peek behind the wool, it does mean all of us need to be a little more discerning and circumspect and careful. And let me tell you that 25 years of Aesop's wisdom tells us there's nothing wrong with that. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. We could say the one-eyed person is king. So in the kingdom of the blind. Now this proverb is a really good one. And it's a really good one to keep in mind, especially if you have an incompetent boss or workplace. Just stick it on a post-it where no one can see it, but stick it someplace where it'll soothe you a bit so you understand why things are so badly run. The proverb in its original form is actually credited to Erasmus in the 1500s, though an earlier version has been tied to earlier writings and interpretations of the book of Genesis. And then it was translated as, in the street of the blind, the one-eyed man is called the guiding light. So the same kind of a thing. So what does it mean? It kind of means that in the midst of all these unseeing, clueless people, a person who can even see a little bit will have the power. And nowadays, what we really take it to mean is that in the midst of the incompetent, the mildly incompetent can run the whole show. Now, how does this relate to narcissism? Basically, in too many cases, the narcissist, because they are so good at front-end trickery and branding, at appearing charming and charismatic and confident and clever, they can convince other people of their competence despite actually having no skills. And people believe because they want to believe. So many of us are hobbled with some forms of social anxiety. We got the messages in childhood and adulthood that, I don't know, that we're not socially competent, or that we aren't good enough, or we're told it was hubris, or we believe it's hubris for us to strive for bigger goals, or that we aren't cut out for leadership, etc., etc. You, all of us, know the limiting things that we tell ourselves. Well, the narcissistic person will come strolling in, talking big, grandiose talk about their ideas or their fibs and lies about everything that they've achieved and or what they're going to achieve, or they're just able to smile big and shake hands firmly and trick everyone. And everyone else in the situation, and everyone else with their invalidating voices in their heads, will assume that anyone who is so confident and so well put together must know what they are talking about. And so everyone else just hands the reins and control over to them. And in the blink of an eye, the one-eyed person becomes king or queen or despot or tyrant. I'd love to hear, though, if any of you have ever worked in such a place where the one-eyed person became the head of the whole thing. Drop that in the comments, because I think it would be good to hear none of us are alone in this. Now, I know personally I have been in this situation numerous times. And early on when I saw this, before I was as educated about narcissism, I actually did that usual classical, it must be me that's wrong, because I'm not getting why this person is the leader. But in fact, I kept seeing this over and over time. And then over time, I'd see that that one-eyed person would take the group, the committee, or the organization off a cliff. Now, because so few people really understand narcissism, or they don't think it's their issue to deal with, narcissistic people are actually able to get the ball really far down the field. We assume confident people are just well put together, and in some cases they are, but those people also have the goods to back it up. The reason narcissism is able to proliferate in our society so quickly and so vastly is that the rest of us are always doubting ourselves, and that may be because so many of us faced lifetimes of gaslighting and narcissistic abuse from various players in our life. Too many of us waste our time living in self-doubt and self-blame and this must be my fault. And then when we do that, the narcissistic people get to run the show because we feel like we don't deserve to be running it, or frankly, at times, we don't want to be bothered running the show. Now, this can happen in families as well. You know the story, the controlling family member. It's typically a parent, but it could be an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent, who through their control and their imperiousness and their authoritarianism, it seems like they have it all under control. And then one day, the family finds that the finances were misused or mismanaged, or other major mistakes were made that put an entire family's security at risk. And this all unfolded, and by the time anyone noticed it, it was too late. Any of you who have watched a family business be frittered away, real estate, bank accounts, all of that just go poof, that was typically because a narcissist was running the show and impulsively and unempathically never considered the harm that what they were doing would cause others, so controlling they didn't tell other people, and being so grandiose that they believed they could figure it out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this happen in families. Now, obviously, all of this also happens in governments and other institutions. Now, in this day and age, or any day and age, honestly, why any sane person would be a politician is beyond me. I don't trust politicians, and in triangulated systems like government, and I mean government from small town governments all the way to the highest halls of leadership, those are often the kingdoms of the blind. The only way to take this back is to understand the dynamics of narcissism and leadership so we can speak out and advocate for ourselves instead of waiting unseeing, uninterested, and unempathic leaders and elected officials to do so on our behalf. Now, this proverb, from the day I read it the first time, has always implied narcissism to me. How quickly incompetence can be rewarded in people who are superficially able to convince other people of their abilities. And then, more often than not, the narcissistic person takes whatever kingdom they are unseeingly running, whether it is a family, a company, a department in a company, a community organization, a government, a club, you name it, and generally run it into the ground. And when it all goes to hell, and it will all go to hell, that one-eyed, mindless leader will turn around and blame it on the incompetence of other people. Rather than taking responsibility themselves, you already know that drill. Narcissistic people never take responsibility. So don't assume that the person in charge should be in charge. Don't assume that leadership is always given to the most deserving. Don't ever passively go along with leadership, because in too many institutional organizations, families, and groups, it is the proverbial one-eyed persons who are running the show. Perhaps the only antidote to this is that we stop enabling the kingdoms of the unseeing or the blind, and that we start opening everyone's eyes, increasing people's self-awareness, building a sense of self in the people who need to see themselves more accurately, to teach everybody about these patterns like narcissism and gaslighting, to make all of us more informed and wise citizens, employees, family members, and human beings. Because until we do that, we are all going to be walking around with the one-eyed people as kings. So that's an old proverb. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. And if you're working in a place that's characterized by daily incompetence, just write it somewhere. Kingdom of the Blind. At least it'll make you smile and maybe even cope. Let's talk about this idea of performative empathy. So let's start by talking about empathy. Empathy is the pivot, right, on which this entire narcissism thing turns, isn't it? The absence of empathy, or at least the very inconsistent nature of the empathy, is why narcissism and narcissists really aren't made for any kind of close relationships. People who fall into relationships of any kind with narcissists, though, often have too much empathy, right? I would argue that overall, there isn't enough empathy in the world that we live in right now. And that fact, if us not having enough empathy in the world has really had terrible effects on the world we live in. But the problem is most people in those narcissistic relationships have too much empathy, if that's possible. Yet the narcissistic folks walk around the world believing that they are so empathic, and other people actually believe it. And why is that? How is it that the least empathic people in the world have managed to trick other people into believing that they are empathic, and that they themselves, the narcissists, actually believe that they are empathic? How the hell did that happen? Well, it comes down to something I'm calling performative empathy, or we could even call it empathy light. Narcissistic folks are really good at doing things that can sometimes look to the world as being nice and empathic when there is an audience. This is the kind of person who makes a great ceremony out of helping an older person across the street when lots of people are watching, or loudly offers to take out the trash at a dinner party, or rescues a bird and posts it on Nextdoor and social media, or keeps bringing parcels of food to an elderly neighbor, or brings home lots of takeout for everyone. And even all of you are thinking, Dr. RAMANI, damn, you are cynical, girl. That seems empathic. Aren't those things empathic? Huh? Does it? Let's take that apart. Empathy is meant to be consistent. So that bird rescuer, or that food bringer over, or that trash taker outer, after the people leave the dinner party, or when they are alone with their family or with their employees, the real question is, how do they behave then? Are they empathic then without an audience? If the very same person who is nursing that little bird with an eyedropper is able to be invalidating and raging and demeaning and abusing the people close to them, I'm sorry, then that's just empathy for display. That on display empathy, that's what we call performative empathy. Performative empathy can also come out in behaviors like gift giving. Narcissistic people can actually be really great gift givers. Gifts are really wrapped nicely. They come at the right time. They're actually right on point. They're given with great ceremony. It can sometimes feel really gross to get these gifts, because if after a person has treated you so badly and left you confused or consistently flaked on you and then shows up with a gift, it's sort of like pouring concrete on that trauma bond. Lots of people get really thrown off by this gift giving. Got to tell you, just earlier today, I ripped a check sent to me by a narcissistic family member that was meant to be a gift. It felt great to rip the check. I got to tell you, I needed the money, but I needed the self-respect more. But many people, when they get a gift from a narcissist, they see the gift and then feel guilty, and they start down that justification highway. Oh, I don't know, it's a nice gift. Maybe they aren't so bad, or maybe I'm being unrealistic and my standards are too high. Maybe. And then you pawn off your sense of well-being for a $50 gift card. Your soul is worth more than whatever that gift cost. I can promise you that right now. Now, performative empathy really also plays on the self-blame dynamic. People will often say, maybe I'm the bad person. The narcissist is walking around rescuing all the neighborhood grasshoppers and giving food to the neighbors, and I'm not doing those things. So maybe I'm the narcissist. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't have empathy, and they're actually the good person, like they said. Of course, that leaves out the many years of psychological abuse they unleashed on you. Now, performative empathy is a quick and dirty way for the narcissistic person to brand or position themselves as a good person to other people. We really do get played when we see people do nice things in the moment, like emptying trash or driving people to the airport during rush hour. But the fact is that if they manipulate you afterwards and hold that airport drive over your head for years, not so empathic. But doing the ostensibly nice thing gets the narcissistic person the validation and the admiration they need. The world, sadly, doesn't really understand what empathy really is and misses the depth of it. And so they think taking the trash out or saving a neighborhood critter qualifies as empathy. Empathy is about being present with a person, truly present with all of a person, and being able to respond to their emotions and attempt to understand them and their emotions. Listen, animal rescue and trash emptying optional. Empathy is a much more deep, reciprocal state. Now, remember that empathy is also about, like I said, self-reflection, not just how we treat and be with others. It's about thinking about how our behavior, our words, our gestures, how they impact other people. It's a constant state that we just don't engage in when we want validation or admiration, but rather it's always there to maintain and sustain healthy and reciprocal social connections. Putting out the trash or saving a lizard is not empathy. They're nice things to do, but it's not like a carbon credit. You can't put out the trash to cancel out verbally abusing someone. Yet, in the little tiny transactional brains of the narcissistic person, that's exactly how it works for them, which is why they're shocked when you think they're not empathic. The notion of performative empathy really reinforces the narcissist's self-perception that they're really nice people. And so when you tell them that they aren't being nice, not only does it activate their inadequacy, but also their shame. And then they lash out at other people. and they lash out at you if you perceive them as being anything but a humane and good person. And so they keep doing these performative acts to foster a perception of they themselves as empathic, which they will then hit you over the head with over and over again. Not so empathic. Now, I know some of you are thinking that what I am talking about here sounds like communal narcissism, and you're spot on right. This is definitely the core dynamic of that communal narcissistic pattern, doing good things to get admiration and validation, but not being a nice person, saving things, saving people, giving people elaborate gifts, donating money, buying everyone's dinner, especially when it's expensive, putting out the trash at a party, whatever gets them praised and seen as an empathic savior. But grandiose narcissists do this as well. And certainly self-righteous narcissists do it all the time. Performative empathy is part of all forms of narcissism. Performative empathy is actually really confusing. So I'm giving you a word for it so you don't put it into the bigger empathy bucket. It's a really important distinction. Performative empathy is sort of doing an empathy dance for show. It's not even empathy. It's showmanship or showpersonship. It's performance. It's being tactical about doing nice things when people are looking, so you can put money in the manipulation bank. And then so the narcissistic person can weaponize those nice things they did and use them against you in an argument, or to silence you, or stonewall you, or gaslight you. I'm a nice person, look what I did. At best, it's empathy light. At worst, it's turning pretend kindness into one more tool of abuse. And the enablers all see it as, look what a nice person they are. So I say, beware narcissists bearing gifts or favors or rescuing or putting out the trash. That performance may not only leave you gaslighted by other people, it muddies the waters and makes those trauma bonds even stronger. Once you see these sort of pseudo-empathic moments as performative, you can break out of the cycle of seeing these narcissists as being oh so empathic and seeing yourself as bad for not seeing them as empathic. There's nothing to see. It's not empathy. It's theater. Recognize the difference. And for those of you who got this far in the video, please, if you've ever had this experience of like, oh my gosh, yes, they would do all these things that other people would see, and everyone's like, oh, they're so empathic and I'm not. Now you understand the difference, and it helps you see like, this is just that sort of performative dance they do, but it's not the real thing. The real thing, empathy, is a lot quieter. It's a lot more gentle. It's a lot more private. And it's something that's not done to get all that validation and all those likes, but something we do from that connected space within us to protect and take care of people we care about, and even people we're just getting to know. When you read biographies of big, famous people, artists, writers, world rulers, warriors, it's clear that a lot of them, if you really dig deep, are pretty narcissistic. History books are kind of mostly a ledger of a lot of narcissistic people, because by and large, the healthy folks don't end up there. Read a biography of any people, of a really, really, really famous person. Tell me what you learn. But what about in modern times? If someone is a brilliant fashion designer, do they get a free pass to be narcissistic? A brilliant filmmaker, free pass? Tech industry innovator, cancer doctor, medical researcher, actor, artist, athlete, novelist, do they all get a free pass? People who defy the normal bounds, who are geniuses, who are exceptional, who have changed the world with their innovations, who have given heartbreaking performances, have written amazing things, created unforgettable pieces of art, who have changed how we communicate with each other, who can perform gravity-defying athletic maneuvers, who create treatments which save lives. Do they get a free pass? If ever there was a video where I wish I could hear your voices, this is it. I'll settle for the comments.
But do these geniuses, these innovators, these visionaries, call them what you will, do they get a free pass to be narcissistic? I can't hear your answers. I'll be able to read them shortly. But what my answer is, no. Lots of people believe that the grandiosity that's so integral to narcissism is why these geniuses, now and throughout history, were why they were able to push the limits. They believed that things could be done, that the rest of us would say, no, I can't even conceive of that. And that change, and their innovations changed the world. I don't believe that grandiosity is necessary to achieve those things, but it can't hurt. In fact, again, if you really crack the history books, there is often the person who is credited with the discovery. Just the way science and all the rest of it works, that there's likely some people who cracked it at around the same time. The more validation-seeking one is the one who ended up in the history books or maybe won the Nobel Prize. I once watched an interview with a guy, I don't know if he was a filmmaker or a director or something. He was offering up commentary on the film The Devil Wears Prada, ultimate narcissism film, right? And in that film, he was talking about the portrayal of this fictional character, Miranda Priestley, the exacting and narcissistically abusive fashion boss who makes her assistants and just about everybody else's lives miserable, and she betrays them and all of that. The commentary guy was saying, so what if she behaves like that? Her character is meant to be a genius, and that makes it okay. And that's when I had a say what moment. But that watching that video and that guy saying that, it made me reflect philosophically on this idea that if a person is at the top of their game, do they have the right to treat other people badly? I don't mean assault them or engage in criminal behavior, but really psychologically invalidating or controlling awful behavior. I think a lot of people will not say they can, but will twist it and say, well, if you're going to work with a genius, you just have to be thick-skinned, which is sort of a twisted way of rationalizing the behavior by saying it is a fault of the people who cannot tolerate the entitled, imperious, and abusive behavior, rather than saying it's not okay to be abusive. I think we are now more than ever in an era where genius and narcissism and antagonism and awful behavior are really conflated. And because some of these so-called geniuses are making a fortune, and they are our modern day kings, empresses, and warlords, we just accept it. Listen, most of us don't and never will interact with these modern day geniuses. We just live our lives. But when we give a free pass to the tyrannical fashionista, artist, movie director, actor, athlete, financier, tech person, or doctor, it trickles down. And we simply all start normalizing toxic behavior. Then, when the local school principal or grocery store manager or parent or partner start behaving horribly, the societal normalization does give license to everyone to behave badly. This little YouTube channel is not going to stop narcissism or narcissistic abuse. My goal is to shed a small light on it and validate your experience in these relationships. Many of our modern day geniuses and visionaries will continue to behave badly. You can set a clock by that. This isn't about that behavior stopping. They are going to do what they do, and they're going to get away with it because they're making someone money, usually themselves. But it is about awareness. It's about not staying in an abusive job with a so-called genius, or putting up with BS in a relationship because you believe you're with a genius of some kind and need to support them, or seeking out abusive mentorship from an abusive person. Listen, I worked in academia for decades. It's a sort of genius-y space, and I cannot tell you the number of ragingly narcissistic people who graduate students and fellows and colleagues would endure because they were a genius who published and got big, fancy global awards. F you. This also begs the question, do you have to be narcissistic to be a genius? And I believe the answer to that is no as well. I do recognize that the discipline, focus, hard work, and out-of-the-boxness that many geniusy types have may make them a bit odd. They may not fit in with usual social structures, may not be a lazy Sunday lie-in kind of person. But I don't think narcissism is a requirement for extraordinary achievement. You know what I mean by some of these geniuses. These are sometimes the odd folks, these geniusy types who will exercise and meditate at 4 a.m. and then eat some grain that we've never heard of at 5 a.m. and have already answered 50 emails by 6 a.m. and then go into a sound bath and then write their novel and then do a million other things and invent a new tech platform, and then they show up at a black tie event that night. That sort of obsessive, don't need sleep, genius precision to life is also a trope that actually does align with narcissism and an obsessive focus on their own rhythms above all else. Certainly selfishness helps at this sort of enacted genius. It helps because the genius becomes so able to focus on one thing. But a genius type may also construct a life a non-narcissistic genius could construct a life that doesn't bring other people down. For example, they may decide not to have children or get married, or may choose a partner that works in a similar way to them. Let's face it, empathy slows people down. The narcissistic genius is not going to sully themselves with the prosaic emotional needs of other people. Can you imagine? I have known good, solid, empathic people who go on to do good, amazing stuff. But maybe the non-narcissistic people are also not on the validation train in such a heavy way. And maybe the social, relational stuff matters. I know it does. It matters more to non-narcissistic folks. And that takes them off the single-minded track of geniosity. I still don't believe narcissism is a precondition of excellence, though. I never will. We can't stop this narcissistic genius worship, but we can stop feeding the beast. All of us need to stop worshiping at the altar of this. You can respect the innovation, but not the innovator's behavior. You can recognize the artistry and also recognize that the artists behave badly. You can be wowed or even helped by someone's scientific discovery and then disavow their abusive behavior. It's okay that you say and identify that they're behaving badly and stop fawning, because that's the problem. We do fawn. They don't care what people think, because there's a line of people around the block who will fawn over them and put up with their bad behavior. You don't need to be in that line. The idea of the terrible genius, the artist's temperament, the abusive demand for obedience and excellence. No, just no. The more of this we worship and enable, the harder we not only make it for ourselves, but for everybody else. When we ooh and ah at their great accomplishments. Listen, if you want to be wowed by their accomplishments, you do you. Just don't date them. Thanks again.